most animals, whether they're birds, reptiles, mammals, we start off with webbed fingers. But what happens is via a process called apoptosis is the cells, it's programmed cell death. And that is the cells in the webbing disappear and they die. And it's a certain program that triggers that. And when these proteins are blocked, everything has webbed feet. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So proteins cause, everything starts out with webbed feet. Proteins cause the webbing to resorb. But if the protein is blocked, everything has webbed feet. Interestingly enough, blocking this protein also turns scutes into feathers, and scutes are basically like scales, only they're on bird legs. There are histological differences between scutes and scales, but they're basically the same thing. Think of them as the big scales on birds' legs. And if you block this protein, it turns scutes into feathers. Now, scutes, smaller scutes called scutella, and scales around the eye all have the same chemical composition as feathers, and they're all controlled by the same genes. And researchers have basically blocked the protein, and we've seen experimentally that these scutes have turned into feathers in reptiles, complete with barbs that are interlocking and they're characteristic of feathers. After all, look at down. Down does not have the interlocking barbs that the flight feathers do, which is why down is fluffy and all over the place, whereas the flight feathers, don't even let the wind slip from them. So, I mean, you have to kind of tackle the idea of how and why did birds evolve? Why did feathers evolve?
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple ideas, one being that they evolved for flight. Personally, I don't believe that, because I think that in order to be efficient enough for flight and to get the brain programming for the pattern, but the pattern meaning like a central pattern generator, in other words, to get the rhythm and the angulation and all the musculature to cooperate, it would require too much at once. Another possibility, insulation, down comforter. I mean, feathers are better than hair, plain and simple, and they're just as easy to evolve. And then over time, it could have been adapted. So the possibility, and then there's another one, and that's that scutes and scales evolved from feathers. For example, like Tyrannosaurus lost its feathers, just like hippos and elephants have lost their hair. Or perhaps feathers are primitive to the whole group, and birds didn't descend from dinosaurs, but rather their brother and sister, and that explains how feathers could be primitive. In other words, right now the idea would be that birds descended from dinosaurs, but what if birds and dinosaurs are brother and sister, and their ancestor had feathers, dinosaurs lost them, birds kept them? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are all sorts of finds all over the place, but as far as stating that what the page ends with, scale cells could never have evolved into feather cells. They not scales, but scutes, very easily could have. They've got the same, they're both the same type of keratin. They're both controlled by the same genes in the same location, and scales can, in fact, turn into feathers in animals that don't have feathers if you simply block the proteins. So,
definitely.
Once again, this jackass who didn't know what he's talking about is lying.
Exactly. My point. He's lying.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel. So, but at any rate, if you scroll back up to number 2, that should have been obvious. So
yeah, and again, that's one of those very common arguments they always use. But anyway, hey, Paul, do you want to put this list on your website, on your blog?
Sure.
Just so our listeners can have something to reference to if they want to, just reminders of what we were talking about. And Whitney, thank you for being on the show. You were great.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for the time.
And I would just remind our listeners to take the time to go view your videos on Dawn Exodus 2. Mm-hmm. Dawn Exodus isn't going to get them anywhere. It's got to be Dawn Exodus.
Well, I mean, if they Google Dawn Exodus, or if they YouTube search Dawn Exodus, I mean, they'll be linked to or directed to Dawn Exodus 2. But youtube.com/user/Dawn Exodus 2 or whatever. Just type in Dawn Exodus 2 on YouTube and you'll find me.
It comes up like right down below. If you just type in Dawn Exodus, it comes up second or third one down. It says Dawn Exodus channel, and it says Dawn Exodus 2 below it.
Real quick, where did the name Dawn Exodus come from?
Ironically, when I was growing up, I loved the Beatles, but I also loved Tupac. Ironically, and he had the whole Dawn thing, and I really liked that. And the Exodus part, Well, that's something that's for another discussion. But my derivation of it doesn't really have anything to do with the Bible. Although there is one verse in Exodus that I absolutely love, and that's and who made thee a king and a judge among men. And I think that's very good, and that's why I decided to get it tattooed on my arm because of that verse. But yeah.
All right.
So it was sort of a combination of the two. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show.
No problem.
And,
thank you for having me.
Everyone,
Hey, it was nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Take it easy. And everyone, thanks for listening.